Mark Twain said it this way: there was never yet an uninteresting life. Such a thing is an impossibility. Inside the dullest exterior, there is a drama, a comedy, and a tragedy. Simply put, everyone has a story. I believe that too many people take theirs for granted. Some people never think about their story, their life story. Some people never process it, nor do people often learn from others. And even worse, most people never, ever tell their story. Over the next few weeks on the Wise Idea podcast, we are focusing on listening and learning from not just our life story, but from the life story of others and even those around us. We want to take our thinking about our own life story to another level. We want to have an appreciation for life in general and our lives in particular. It's hard, to fully appreciate parts of our life story, often while we're in the situations themselves. That's a thing called hindsight. One person said it this way: the historian is a prophet looking backwards. Arthur Conan Doyle of the complete Sherlock Holmes series said it this way: it is easy to be wise after the event. Oh, that's so good. Milan Kundera said it this way: we go through the present blindfolded. Only later, when the blindfold is removed and we examine the past, do we realize what we've been through and understand what it means. So simply put, we're going to evaluate our life stories. I ask you the question today: what is your life story?
Welcome to the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris, focusing on life, leadership, family, marriage, and the church. We are providing tools for our inspiration and wisdom for life. Our goal is to inspire everyday people to live wise lives. If you're new to us, we release a brand new podcast weekly on Thursdays. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode. Here's our host, Christopher J. Harris.
Hello, my friends. Welcome again to another episode of the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. I am your host, and I'm so honored that you've taken the time to hang out with us for another week. Every single week, our audience continues to grow. And now that we are literally in 23 countries across the world, I'm so honored every single week when folks make the choice. Man, there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts that exist, and you make the choice to be a part of our particular podcast. And so it's always nice to say thank you. So thank you to every single one of you that are tuned in and that tune in on a regular basis. Of course, our mission is to provide strategies for hearts to be inspired and for heads to become wise. Our goal is simply to inspire everyday people to live wise lives. And so for those of you that are new to our podcast, we focus on 4 areas. We focus on life, leadership, family and marriage, and ministry, that is the church. And at various points, we're able to cover topics that cover all 4 of those, and sometimes it's one topic at a time. Nonetheless, I am so honored that you guys have tuned in, particularly for this particular series. We have been, over the last few weeks, in a series talking about life stories. And it has been my privilege and my honor to welcome the guests that we've had on. And I want to be able to jump right into our topic today. But let me just say, today you all also get a chance to experience real life. I literally lost my voice 3 days ago, and it just came back yesterday. And our guests that we have on today have such busy schedules that I didn't want to reschedule. And we are all literally juggling. So if you hear me sounding a little bit different than the norm, just know that I'm acknowledging that on the front end. And I don't necessarily apologize for it because I value the content that we bring, and we're gonna make it happen. This is real life. So with all of that said, our announcer's gonna come some other time later in the episode, give you some more details about how to connect with us and how to follow up. But I want to invite you guys to welcome to the podcast the founders and inventors of a major business called Gabby Bowes. I've got Rozalynn Goodwin and Gabby Goodwin on the line with us today in the studio. What's up, guys?
Hi.
So happy to have you all on today. This has been a long time coming, and I'm honored to have you on. For those of you that are regulars on the podcast, you may recognize that last name, Goodwin. One of my good friends, Michael Bowtie Goodwin. This is his tribe, his family. And so now he gets a chance to get muted on the podcast, and I get a chance to put them on the podcast. This is so fun. So I don't even know how to jump in other than to say, tell us about Gabby Bowes. Tell us the background. Where did this all get started, and what is it?
Yes, so Gabby Bowes are what we created. They are barrettes that don't fly out the hair. And it all came about when my mom was frustrated about me always losing my barrettes. And she started ranting on Twitter. And many moms agreed. Our pastor saw the tweet and said, sounds like a market you need to break into. And so my mom told me when I was about 5. So every day I kept asking her, when are my bows coming? When are we going to rent my bows? And I kept nagging her and pushing her. And we started to come up with the design and the idea, and now it's a reality.
Wow. And how long ago was that?
That was when I was 5, so probably like 8 or 7 years ago.
Wow. All right. So let's do some quick education because I've got a very, very diverse audience that is listening to this. So let's first talk about what are bows or what are barrettes. Try to explain that to people who may not be familiar with that.
So barrettes are those plastic decorative ornaments that people place in at the ends of the hair. They usually are at the ends of twists or braids. So some of this may be jogging some of your memory. Some of you might have worn them as a child, but they're usually worn at the ends of twists or braids in little girls' hair. And this has been an age-old problem. I mean, I was losing my barrettes when I was young. My mom was losing her barrettes when she was young. And we've just become accustomed to this problem and just dealt with it by tying rubber bands around the barrettes to keep them on or doing all these different types of tricks. And, we realized the barrettes really were not made or created to stay on our hair, particularly thick, curly hair. And they weren't meant to be, hair accessories on the ends of pigtails, braids, or twists. They were more so created, I believe, looking at the design of the mainstream barrettes, the existing barrettes, is just to be as a clip, just to kind of pull hair back. So we've just kind of gotten accustomed to losing them. One day I just got frustrated. I went to go buy them because I was buying them every 2 weeks, Christopher. Every single 2 weeks I was in a beauty supply store buying these barrettes. And you say, well, man, they're just $1. But by the time you buy 30 packs and you do that every 2 weeks, you get a little frustrated. And for this particular Sunday that I had gone and bought more colors, because Gabby was constantly losing them. If I sent her to school with 10, she came back with 6. I would send her to school with 12. She came back with 8. I mean, it just never failed. She was always missing a barrette. I bought a number of packs and was trying to sort them by color when I got home and got frustrated, realizing that some of the barrettes didn't even have a clasp on them to close them with no hair inside. Imagine what would happen by the time I put them on a 5-year-old, very active little girl. So I got frustrated and do what a lot of moms do and just go rant on social media, not trying to initiate a company or a patented invention. Of course not. I was just trying to let off some steam, and a number of moms chimed in. Our pastor, Bishop Herbert Bailey, hopped into this conversation with a bunch of moms on a Sunday afternoon. I will never know, other than God ordained for him to be on Twitter at the time, chimed in, jumped into the conversation and said just what Gabby just reiterated. Sounds like a market you need to break into.
Wow. So I'm sitting here, I'm shaking my head. Of course, this is an audio podcast, so people can't see it, but I'm shaking my head because any parent that just heard what you just said, can I clearly identify with how frustrating it is when your kids, you make the investment or you spend the money and your kids, I mean, it could not just be hair stuff. It could be toys. It could be socks. There's got to be like this unknown black hole that parents have not yet found when it comes to socks. Because I promise, if I had stock in sock companies, I would be a multi-billionaire multiple times over. So I think many parents can clearly identify with that. So, all right, let me ask a question that's like maybe one of the elephants in the room. So are these barrettes, are they for white folks as well?
The barrettes they work for all hair types. You know, honestly, when we went out to set out, we weren't trying to start a company. We weren't trying to get a patent. We weren't trying to do any of that. When Gabby kept asking, Mommy, when are my bows coming? Mommy, when are we going to make my bows? When are my bows coming? Every single day. Or we walk through a grocery store and she'd say, Mommy, are my bows going to be sold in Publix? I mean, she really, looking back now, she was divinely inspired at the age of 5 to nag me until I gave in. And what I gave into in my mind was, okay, this is a science project. It's a science experiment. She's clearly excited about it. This is my first and only daughter. I want to make sure that I am not communicating to her that things are impossible. So it's a science project. We come up with an idea. We get somebody to draw it and we sell it and we go on with our normal lives. That's all I was thinking. So the barrette was created just to make sure it doesn't slip out of the hair. It didn't matter what type of hair. Because of the engineering of the barrette, it works on all types of hair. And you can see on our website and on social media pages, it literally works for all hair types. It can be worn as a hair clip. It can be worn at the end of a pigtail, a braid, or a twist. Because of the 2 faces, the teeth, the craters, the center strip, the strategically placed teeth, it works for all hair types. So whether it's curly, thick, thin, straight, because of the engineering, it does not slip out of the hair. We literally have girls doing taekwondo, swimming, playing basketball, baseball, in the playground, sleeping, and not losing barrettes. We honestly have families who are using the same barrettes for 3 daughters. So wow. You do not lose Gabby bows. And if some kind of way a barrette slips out, we have a guarantee we'll replace it with 2.
Wow. That's a major guarantee. So let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about some of the mountains and some of the valleys that you guys have experienced, because we are on, one side of the story, and that is that many people will look at you all and just almost be envious. You've been in the Tom Joyner family reunion. You've been on cruises. You guys have been featured in Black Enterprise. Almost every major network has featured you guys across the country. You're in major stores, Walgreens, Target. I mean, so many other stores, and you could probably run down the list there better than I can. But somebody will see all of that and say, man, that is just not attainable for me, right? That's just not realistic for my family and for what we have going on. So let's talk about, okay, so Gabby's nagging. Gabby's like, when are my bows coming? When are my bows coming? What are the processes? You mentioned a patent. Just what all takes place to even get all of this to fruition and get this to the point where you guys are now?
So what we did afterwards was basically my mom thought this was a science project and that we were going to sell it to a major company. So we came up with the design, and had somebody draw it, and then we were able to take it to an actual company and we were trying to sell it to them. Like, as you can see, that didn't really work out as planned, but we went through like 2 focus groups, but then they said that it wasn't really the fit for the business. So we, as a company, because I was still nagging every single day, and my mom really wanted to show me that anything is possible and that I was able to get this, we were able to get this science project done. And so she was talking to one of the people there. She was like, my daughter is nagging me every single day. Can y'all really help me just finish this science project? So we were able to find our engineers and our manufacturers who are still working with today, but we were able to get the science project done, which eventually came into a business.
Yeah, so as we were talking to that major established hair accessory company, and they passed on the idea, I didn't let them go. I said, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you taking us through 2 rounds of focus groups, but I cannot go home and tell my daughter that because you said no, that this is the end and that we won't finish the science project. Can you help me finish the science project? And he said, ma'am, do you know how much that's going to cost? I said, I don't. And I don't even want to ask, but I cannot go home and tell my daughter that we quit when somebody says no. He connected us to engineers and the engineers connected us to our manufacturers. As Gabby said, we're still working with them today. He basically went through their database and said, okay, here are 2 engineers we have done work with ourselves. When you call them, they're going to tell you that they don't work for startups, but you can tell them I told you to call. It's just the favor of God. And, I did. I called and they said, ma'am, we don't work with startups. And I said, well, Stan told me to call, and you could hear them breathe like, oh. So they basically said, ma'am, you got 15 minutes. And if we decide to work with you, we'll let you know right there on the spot. The meeting started off kind of rocky because I was in a room full of men who did not look like me at all. But by the end of the meeting, they said, we think you're on to something. Let's get started. And we've been working with them ever since. So the design process, we basically sit down at the kitchen table. At the level of her comprehension, we look at the existing barrettes on the market. Went and bought barrettes that were on the market. We looked at the barrettes we had at home and said, okay, why is this one working a little better than this one? One of the first things we wanted to do was have a barrette that the design could always be visible. My mom has a huge pet peeve, or had a huge pet peeve, that every time I'd put a barrette on Gabby's hair, it would turn and you would just see the strip, just the ugly strip on the back of the barrette. You couldn't see the flower or the poodle or the ladybug or whatever the design was on the barrette, because it just had one face. So the 2-face idea was one of the first things. That if we're going to solve this problem, we're going to make sure that it has 2 faces so you can always see the design, whether your little girl is running or jumping or skipping, and that design is always visible. And then we had to figure out, okay, how does it not slip out of the hair? So we, realized that. So Gabby would go to school with different types of barrettes on, and maybe one would come back, and we said, okay, this one worked a little better. Gabby, why do you think this one stayed in better? She said, well, maybe it's those little spiky things there. So by this time she's 5, 6 years old, getting older. And we basically taking notes, literally like a science project, making observations, taking notes that it needs to have teeth. It needs to have 2 designs. We saw that some barrettes maybe had some space, and it's a common practice that moms wrap hair around the strip. I said, okay, so if we use that practice, what's going to still hold it on? The 2 faces can hold the wraparound method. So we got the wraparound method. We added some space or craters to kind of trap and gather the hair. So it's like a triple hold. As we came up with the observations, the image of the idea came, but I couldn't draw. No one in our house could draw. So we basically went to an artist at our church, and I sat down with him and tried to communicate to him what was in my head. And he created a 3D image of what was in my head. And that's the image we took to the established accessory company. And there's so many pitfalls along the way. I mean, if someone has an idea, don't just send your drawings out without protection. I was doing that. Please, please, please don't do that. You may walk into a store and see your invention. I was sending it out to major companies, sending it out on different websites. Not saying you can't do that, but before you do that, get some type of protection. We always advise people to get at least a provisional patent from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. It's less than $300. It's 2 pages. You can write it yourself. It's not a full patent, but it gives you at least a year of semi-protection while you're talking to people about an idea. I was just sending out stuff out just willy-nilly, just sending it. You please don't do that, okay? Get some type of protection. I know that before you get a lawyer involved, of course, that can be very expensive, but that is something you can do yourself before you get a lawyer involved, but just get some type of protection before you start talking to other people. So that's a side note, but that is just kind of what the process was like. We had that image. We started sending it out to companies because, like I said, my wildest dream was us selling it to an existing established company. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. We're actually first and now second generation entrepreneurs. I had no idea how to start a business, and I wasn't trying to start one. It just happened that we ended up starting a business.
All right, guys, we'll be right back. I know you are right in the middle of an incredible conversation and you were gleaning things from this incredible conversation that we're having currently. We'll get right back to it. I was enjoying myself as well, but I wanted to interject really quickly and just invite you, if you are listening to this podcast, that probably means that you are also on social media. Well, listen, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. As a matter of fact, y'all, guess what? I'm also on Pinterest. I would love to have you as a part of my tribe, my following, my connection, my social media family. And so if you're on any of those platforms, I'm at CJ Harris. CJ Harris, ONE. Would love to connect with you. So while this commercial is even going on, before we get back into the conversation, why don't you go online right now, pull your devices out, pull your computer out, and hit the follow button, hit the friend request button, hit the engage button, and we'd be so glad to have you as a part of our social media following and family. Not only that, as you listen to this podcast, you may be hearing things that are insightful for you, things that are being shared where the light bulb goes off. I would love to hear about those moments. As a matter of fact, you may be listening and there may be questions that you have or things you'd like to share with us that you're hearing. And either way, we'd love to hear from you. So please send us an email. The email address is info, I-N-F-O, at ChristopherJHarris.com. Again, that's info at ChristopherJHarris.com. Not only that, but lastly, if you have a project or a book or a platform that you'd like to promote or advertise with us, you're thinking that this would be a great audience for you to reach and connect with, we'd love to start a conversation with you about that. So please send us an email, again, at info at ChristopherJHarris.com. And in turn, we'll send you an information sheet and be glad to start that incredible conversation of partnership with you. With that said, guys, let's get right back into this amazing conversation that we're having. Be sure to pull your notes back out. It's going to be fun. Let's go. So that process that you just described, how long was that?
It was like 2 years. 2 years of research, development, meeting with engineers. We launched the product when Gabby was 7. We launched the product in February of 2014. So let me just ask a couple practical questions, right? So if I'm hearing this, so first of all, what compelled this, based on what you guys have said, is that Gabby kept nagging. So how do you get a 5, 6, and a 7-year-old to be patient enough for 2 years? Because there's no bowls coming home right now still, right? You're right.
Okay.
How were you patient? I was just waiting. I was excited, but I was just trying to wait because I knew it was coming. So wow. I was just waiting, and it finally came.
Wow.
I think she saw the progress too. I mean, she saw the pictures. She saw that we were, still making notes and observations. when we had the image, the 3D image, that was another like, okay, yeah, it's coming. And I just never discouraged her. And our pastor teaches us a lot about what we say and what we speak, particularly to our children. So when we were walking through Publix, and she would say things like, "Mommy, are my bows gonna be sold in Publix?" Now, we didn't have a drawing, we didn't have a concept, we didn't have anything. And in my mind, I'm like, what in the world? Where did this girl come from? Where? I don't even know where to start. Like, I can't even draw. Like, oh my goodness, God, what are you doing to me?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I would basically just look at her and smile and say, if you believe and work hard, anything's possible. Then I turn my head and be like, Lord Jesus, I don't know what I'm doing. But
so let me
be careful not to discourage her, because she really believed that her bows could be sold in the store, and we didn't even have a bow,
Yeah. So let me ask this, because I think as parents, and I'm gonna ask this, and then we'll get into some more of the entrepreneurial stuff as a part of the story. But as parents, I think often we can recognize when there's almost this drive or this unction from our kids versus just like these whims, right? Like, even as adults, we can recognize that there were points in our lives where we had these whims where, oh, I want to play this or I want to do that. So it sounds like for you as a mom and as for your husband, it sounded like you all recognized that maybe this wasn't just a whim. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly what you're hearing. I mean, for her to be that young and to be that persistent, what happened is I was styling her hair before I sent her to school, and the conversation that pastor jumped in, I was thinking about it as I was styling her hair. So Gabby wasn't on Twitter, so she didn't know any of the thing that was going on. And this was probably about 2 weeks prior. So I'm on Twitter. I'm going back and forth with moms who are just tired of barrettes slipping out and having to put rubber bands on the ends. My pastor jumps in the conversation. Sounds like a market you need to break into. I said something like, yes, sir, I'll look into it. I wasn't really trying to look into anything. 2 weeks later, I'm doing Gabrielle's hair, but I can't get this social media exchange off my mind. So much so, I'm doing her hair, and I'm frustrated doing her hair because I know that these barrettes I just bought are not coming home. I mumbled under my breath, did not think I was audible. I said, somebody needs to make a bow. Gabby heard me, 5 years old, jumped out of the seat and said, Mommy, are we going to make a bow?
Wow.
It threw me off, and I said something to just kind of brush her off, and I thought that would be the end of the conversation. But as soon as I picked her up from school that day, she asked, Mommy, when are my bows coming? The next day, Mommy, when are we going to make my bows? Mommy, when are my bows coming? It's just constantly. So finally, at that point, I'm like, okay, this is not a whim. This, if my pastor couldn't get to me through Twitter, God is speaking to me through my 5-year-old child.
Wow.
And it didn't take long for me to realize that, okay, you need to listen. And he had to come through her.
So what's amazing about hearing you say this is, I've had the privilege of either directly from face-to-face interaction or through reading, have listened and heard the stories of many, many business leaders and entrepreneurs. And I mean, even in the context of church planters, idea people, just the whole 9 yards. And your story in this case sounds very similar because there was this idea that literally wrestled you down and you just couldn't let it go. And so that's really interesting for me to hear that.
Exactly. And it came in the form of a 5-year-old child. And as a mom, as a parent, I remember hearing someone say recently, you make a promise to your child, like it's nothing like it. It'll help you get through all the obstacles. Lord knows we've had many. Anytime you see somebody with any measure of success, whether some type of media feature or any type of big yes, I promise you, there have been at least 10 times the no's. And the no's have been huge.
Yeah.
So, behind every yes you celebrate or see on social media, I promise you there's at least 10 no's that led up to that. And you're celebrating the yes. But that founder, that visionary has had to deal with many no's before that yes.
So let's talk about some of those no's then. You just gave some great wisdom about, you know, making sure that your product is, you talked about the patenting process and just some of the steps there. So again, you know, people will see the Black Enterprise Young Entrepreneur of the Year. Y'all got the patent now at 7 years old. Gabby is taking a science project and now brought it to fruition. Let's talk about some of those no's and some of those frustrating moments where maybe you've got to have a conversation with Gabby and say, okay, Gabby, maybe this isn't the way we're supposed to go, just, or whatever that looks like. Let's talk about some of those.
You go ahead.
You can go ahead.
There are several, and Gabby can mention many of them, but, you know, there were the TV shows that you know, major network TV shows that people think they've seen us on, but they haven't, that we've gone all the way to the end. And then they say, maybe next year. And you've gone through the whole 9-month process, or you have recorded for national television and the show didn't air twice, 2 different shows, you know, so it's those things. It's being in retail too early, looking back on it now, and being discontinued out of retail.
What does that mean when you say discontinued?
So I'll give you the story of Walgreens. So we launched the product, Gabby's 7 years old, February 2014. Everybody's like, oh my God, a 7-year-old and a mom invented a barrette that doesn't slip out. It's a wonderful story. Our local Walgreens gets a hold of the story and says, you know, can we carry the bows? We're less than 6 months into business. Now, mind you, no bank will loan us any money. We're basically taking money out of our retirement, my husband and I, and buying as many bows as we can that we have capital for. So we're buying the minimum amount of bows. And when you buy the minimum amount of bows, you're getting them produced overseas and shipped over by sea or air if you don't have that much time, you don't have any type of margin. But we didn't know any better. First time entrepreneurs were Walgreens. Let's go to Walgreens. But we were essentially paying Walgreens to have our bows on their shelves. We weren't making any money, and Walgreens wasn't making any money either. And then by the time, you know, they went from 1 store to 10 stores to 40 stores in 2 states. And then they want to go to 400 stores in 4 states. By that time, corporate gets hold of it, gets wind of it, and looks at the margins and is like, what? Why are we expanding a product that is not even meeting the minimum for products in our category? So when you're in retail, there are certain categories that your product falls under. So ours falls under hair accessories. If they're used to getting 50% margin, but you're only giving them 30% margin, corporate's going to cut you off. And it's exactly what happened. We were on our way. Gabby can tell the story better. Go ahead.
So we were on our way to a photo shoot for a newspaper, doing an article about the expansion, and then we were getting ready to go, and my mom got a call saying that they were canceling the expansion and they weren't selling Gabby bows anymore because we weren't making as much margin. And so my mom had to go and get us out of the car, and we were so excited about it, but then we had heard that we weren't going to be sold in Walgreens anymore. And so I saw that my mom was crying. She was so upset. And for me, in my 2nd grade mind, I forgot to tell my mom what I learned at school the other day, but it came at the right time because it showed that I was still gonna keep going no matter what no I get. So I was like, oh, that's fine. Did you know there's a Shark Tank in Canada called Dragons? And it was really weird, but it was also showing that I wasn't gonna give up on my dreams just because of that one note.
Yeah, it when she said that, because I cried. I called Mike. He was on the road, and I was crying so hard he thought like somebody had left our family. We were literally, we had makeup done and hair done. Like, we were ready for a major photo shoot, driving about an hour to get to the shoot. They're in the car. I step back in the house to grab something, and I get the phone call. And I have to call and cancel this interview, and we had announced it on social media about this expansion. So it was embarrassing. It was all of those things. And I waited a while to tell Gabby, because I was like, how am I going to tell her this? But when I did, she was like, she was disappointed. But when she came back with the Shark Tank in Canada, I was just like, whoa, like the resilience. And what I tell parents all the time, which they're concerned about exposing their children to risk and failure. I am telling you that because Gabby has been exposed to know more than some adults have, her resilience is remarkable. She is stronger than I ever could have thought to be at 12 years old. She has even coined a phrase that she'll share later about what no really means, because we have not kept her away from risk taking. We've not kept her away from no. We've encouraged her to pursue things even though she knows she may get a no. It has really built a strength in her that regardless of what her future holds, she's going to be a stronger, more capable human being because of this experience through entrepreneurship. So I'm sharing just a couple of, there have been so many. we're dealing with all kinds of things even right now. We got great opportunities, but challenges with funding and challenges with access to capital. We're still in the heat of all of those things. So yeah, you see Black Enterprise Teenpreneur of the Year. Like, you see Teenpreneur of the Year 2018.
I was the finalist 2017.
Yeah, you don't know the 2017 story. Tell them the 2017 story.
Yeah, I was finalist the year before, 2017. And for me to be able to like travel all the way to Houston and be there the whole entire conference, and then be so excited and realize that you lost, like, seriously? And I was 10. So I came back home, and my dad told me that tears are the nutrients of dreams, like sunlight is to plants. So I was able to
say that again, Gabby. Say that again. Your dad said what?
Tears are the nutrients of dreams, like sunlight is to plants.
Okay, slow down and say it one more time so we can make sure we hear that clearly.
Okay. Tears are the nutrients of dreams, like sunlight is to plants.
So tears are the nutrients to dreams, like sunlight is to plants. Wow.
So I was able to take that, and even though I was nervous to go and apply for it again the next year, 2018, I was able to, and that year I actually won. So it showed me that I didn't have to give up just because of that one no, and that I could be able to realize the phrase that my mom was talking about. I was able to realize that no is just an abbreviation for next opportunity.
No is an abbreviation for next opportunity.
Yes.
Good gracious. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is part one of our discussion with the founders and CEOs of Gabby Bowes. Man, so much insight and so much wisdom in learning from their story. I'm so thankful to have them on, and so thankful that they will also be back on with us next week to continue this discussion of how they have evolved into this behemoth that they are, and how they're going to reinvent themselves and what that looks like, and even more wisdom that they've learned through their own process. So Look forward and join us back next week for part 2 of this conversation with Gabby Bowes, with both Rozalynn and with Gabby next week. You all know how I end every single broadcast before our announcer comes. I want to tell you, live wisely.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the Wise Idea Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. We hope you enjoyed our time together. If you did and would like additional resources and information, you can find the previous episodes, show notes, featured guest information, and more at www.thewise-idea-podcast.com. We also invite you to join the conversation on social media. The Wise Idea Podcast is on Twitter and Facebook. Find us at The Wise Idea and at our Facebook group, The Wise Idea Podcast. On Instagram, find us at The Wise Idea Podcast. Our host is also on social media. You can find him regularly on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, all located at CJ Harris 1. Finally, if you enjoyed what you've heard, head over to iTunes and or Google Play and leave a rating and review for other listeners to find us. Our podcast is also on Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you the next time. Live wisely.
Get understanding. The principal thing in all I getting, get understanding. Principal thing in all I getting, get understanding. Say was the principal thing in all I getting, get understanding. Principal thing in all I getting, get understanding. Say was the principal thing in all I getting, get understanding.